When it comes to costs in the cattle industry, almost nothing hits harder than BRD. Bovine respiratory disease costs money in lost calves, poor performing animals, and in the expense of medications to prevent or treat the disease. That's why, as a cattle producer myself, I'm excited to hear about the BRD CAP, the Coordinated Agricultural Project Team that's working to identify new tools in the fight. Cattleman to Cattleman reporter Brian Baxter has an update on the BRD CAP.
For feedlot managers like J.W. Wood of AgriBeef in Moses Lake, Washington, the battle against BRD, Bovine Respiratory Disease, seems to be never-ending.
So one of our biggest animal health issues is respiratory disease. It accounts for about 50% of our total death loss, and it's something that we work really hard to manage, and is definitely one of the diseases we spend the most resources trying to manage. The pen riders are really good at going in there and being able to find things that myself or a lot of other people couldn't probably identify in terms of depression, cattle that are real sort of sucked in and gaint. Droopy ears is one of the big ones they always talk about, and then some snot from the nose and stuff. But depression's really the big one. They'll pass up a lot of those things, but they won't pass up depression. If they see one that looks kind of with their head down and depressed and isn't very attentive, that's one that's a good candidate to make it to the hospital.
Going to the hospital is necessary for a sick calf, but costly for the feedlot. Across the entire U.S. beef industry, the dollars lost due to BRD add up to huge numbers.
Bovine respiratory disease is one of the most common infectious diseases in cattle worldwide, and it is also one of the most economically devastating diseases.
We estimate very conservatively that the economic loss at the beef feedlot is over $1 billion annually, and that loss stems from mortality loss and largely quality grade losses in the cattle that end up with the disease.
So we've never done the analysis for our location to probably determine the appropriate cost, but it's quite substantial. In visiting with some of the researchers, costs can be up to $253 a head per case. So it's quite substantial, and in an industry where margins are pretty thin anyway, it's something we really are attentive to.
Together, Shannon and Holly Nybergs are working as part of a multi-year research project funded by the USDA known as the BRD CAP. The project involves researchers and experts from several universities, all working together to develop tools that will help reduce the incidence of BRD.
And so trying to identify ways of reducing the prevalence or incidence of bovine respiratory disease in cattle is one of the goals of this project. We're looking at this in a little bit different way, where we're trying to approach it in a more permanent aspect, where we can try to select cattle that are resistant or less susceptible to this disease by breeding animals that do not have the likelihood of getting the disease. And so our goal then is to reduce the incidence of BRD by producing cattle that are less likely to become infected. The deliverables for the product on the research side is trying to identify the genomic regions that are associated with BRD's susceptibility. And if we identify those genomic regions, we will then be able to use a genotyping platform where the breed associations and the AI companies can use those as part of a sire summary or as part of breeding values to select animals that are less likely to be affected with BRD. This will translate then in reduced incidence of BRD in the cattle industry.
By working with AgriBeef's Par 4 feedlot and others in the cattle industry nationwide, the BRD CAP researchers are gathering valuable genetic data on animals that may show greater or less susceptibility to BRD.
The industry has been integral in our ability to conduct these studies. For example, just in the two studies looking at the beef and dairy herds, trying to identify animals that are susceptible and resistant, we have screened hundreds of thousands of animals. And if we had to purchase each of those animals and feed those animals for the sole purpose of the study, we wouldn't have been able to conduct the study. So the partnering of the BRD CAP with industry has been critical in our ability to conduct these studies.
anything we can do to decrease our mortality and morbidity rates is going to be in our favor, right? And so we're really, as an industry, it's a big concern of ours, and like I said, it accounts for nearly 50% of our death loss, and so anything we can do to lessen that and work with the researchers in order to lessen those BRD cases is going to be in our benefit.
Genetics is only one factor. Stress, weather, and the overall animal health protocol for calves will always play a role. However, the goal of providing producers both at the feedlot and cow-calf level a tool they can put to work to select BRD-resistant animals is growing closer to reality.
Those genetic tools, the genetic selection is going to occur at the cow-calf level. And so how can the cow-calf producer take advantage of making these genetic selection decisions in their operation? So there's really twofold. One is reducing BRD losses at their own ranch, if those occur. But really the majority of the economic loss occurs at the feedlot level as those calves are transferred in ownership to the feedlot. And a cow-calf producer is going to be interested in that and looking at reducing the disease susceptibility at the feedlot level, because those improved values are going to be passed back through the chain and be valued as higher valued calves when they go to sell them through the feedlot.
So marker-assisted selection is when we have markers or regions on the DNA that are variant that we can follow in cattle to predict what their performance is going to be. In this instances, we would predict if they were likely to become infected with BRD or not. So if we can identify those regions and we can look at those markers that we know mean that an animal is less likely to become susceptible to BRD, we can select for those animals that are less likely to become affected. So when they get into the feedlot or when they become mother cows, we will have a lower incidence of the disease both in the feedlot and in the herd.
And that's a result that BRD CAP researchers and beef cattle producers are eagerly anticipating. From Washington State, I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman.
The BRD Coordinated Agricultural Project is continuing, and the group meets regularly to review and report on its progress. If you'd like to find out more about all of the research efforts in the battle against BRD, just visit the website brdcomplex.org.